Okay, we're going.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody. Oh, we're still a minute early. That's not fair for people that joined just on time. I'll give them another minute. Very nice to see you. Thank you very much for those of you who have made a point of getting in early. That's great. We will be going quickly, as we always do. The thing to remember is that the resource that we're sharing with you, you do not have to read every slide. You'll have your own access to it. We'll give you the link to the presentation. So you're not expected to be kind of reading what's on the screen, listening to us, etc. Listen to us. We're much more fun. And then you can come back. You will know what's there. So we're giving you a quick overview of this world map, and you can zoom in at the bits that are really of interest at any time you like. Okay, so let's begin. We're looking at OERs, and we're going to be looking at the 5 R's of OERs, and we've added some extra R's ourselves. In terms of the introduction, this is the very last of the official first suite of webinars. So on the other tabs there, you can see a little bit more about what the rest of the project has looked like. There we go, he got there. So this is number 18. The other 18 are all there. They've got recordings, they've got resources, they've got links, mind maps, and so on. And Future Teacher will be continuing, and we'll tell you more about that later. It's going to be, as I said, fast-paced session, but you will have access to the resource yourself in real time in about 2 minutes' time. So this is us, Lillian, myself, Alistair, and Ron, and you can read more about us if you want to, and you can read more about the teacher project if you want to. There's the sorts of topics that we've covered so far. They will be maintained for several years, and you'll be free to give them a long-term future, which is exactly what today's about. So on the next slide, we'd like you to take this link. So that's, see, we pop that in the text chat. Perhaps somebody can get there. Well done, Lillian. Lillian's in first. So if you want to open that up, that would be a really good start. And then the first thing that is on there is the mind map, which, or was that the first thing? Maybe it was the second thing. Yeah, sorry.
The things that people said during registration.
The things that people said. So over to Lillian.
Okay, so
2 minutes ahead of time.
Brilliant. So normally when you sign up, we ask you what you'd like to get out of this session, and these are just some of the comments from people. So what I've done is on the next page on the mind map, I've put it together. Ron, if you don't mind showing the bottom half of the mind map, I've kind of collated them, done a bit of a thematic analysis. So it's popped out into a few different areas that people want to look at, and I've called them your goals. And we've just checked basically that everything that we're going to cover between ourselves and our guest speakers will be covered by the session, and I'm quite assured that we will be able to cover them all. And then on this right hand bit, we managed to kind of identify an R for everything that kind of covers this OER topic. And kind of in Sesame Street style, today's session is sponsored by the letter R. Yes. So on to the next bit, which is really getting to know what you think about OER. So this is kind of like the things you want out of a blind date, in a sense. What are you looking for in an OER? So if you go looking for something to use, what are the traits that make you attracted to material that you intend to use with your own staff or with your own students in any situation at all? So if you want to use the text chat, if you found that chat OER.
I'll put the link in there to the resource that we're looking at, so you can follow us on your own version as well. We're on page 7.
And we're just popping into the text next chat, the kind of things we're looking for in open educational resource. So Noelle has mentioned relevant and at the right level. I guess sometimes that can be quite hard. Sometimes people create things at quite generic levels, and so what Alistair says about being able to break it up and reassemble, it's really useful to make that happen. Yes, I think Teresa makes a very valid point, trying to ensure that people understand how the resource can be used or reused. And yeah, again, Noella mentions about this adjusting and contextualizing, because I think quite often if you're using another tutor's materials, let's say it's a PowerPoint, you can't help but adjust it. And Ron, Alistair and I have managed to kind of work together in a flow that means we tweak each other's pages once in a while, you know, but I think we add value between us. Recommendations, Terry mentions recommendations by other people, so almost like cited by would be quite useful. I don't know, does anyone know of a source where you can almost see how many other people have used the material before? That would be a really nice idea. I'm not aware of anywhere where we can do that. So yes, contextual information so that you know who the content's targeted at. That makes it very valid. So what else do we have here? Have you spotted anything else, Alistair, that you'd like to comment on?
No, I was just looking at Samantha's point there about there are some repositories that will give you stats. So some of the open educational repositories and some of the journals would give you stats, which is a really nice thing. You can kind of get a sense of how popular things are.
And Sarah was saying about Jorum, you know, was Jorum like that? I guess Jorum did provide that kind of service, but I don't know that that's still running.
I think part of the problem with Jorum was that the way things were often bundled together in zip files, and you had to unzip a zip, and then, you know, it wasn't necessarily very straightforward and easy.
But also the thing that was in our publicity about today was about the extinction of many of those types of repositories and so on. Many of them don't exist anymore.
No.
We have a nice...
in the FE sector, there was a FERL repository, wasn't there, that we used to use?
Yeah.
Long since gone.
Thanks for that, Terry. Popped in a link there. I mean, like the Wikipedia pages, you know, or Wikimedia pages, you know, you have the opportunity to add how you have reused something, and that's quite useful, I think. To give you a sense of, you know, where else something has been used or reused. So yeah, produced by communities of practice. Frank is saying, you know, I guess stuff produced by communities of practice provide that extra layer of depth, I think, to a resource. So yeah, that's very useful. Okay, right, thanks for that, Alistair. Right, that was a useful chat. So on to what OER is as defined by. I had to go and look up William and Flora Hewlett's foundation. It was fascinating. I went down a rabbit hole there. So these people have been kind of providing and been doing philanthropic work for many years, over 50 years. But they've been promoting OER since 2002. So I guess they know what they're talking about here. But I guess we all agree that what OER is something we can all use for teaching and learning, and I guess research as well, in all sorts of media. And the key definition here is they reside in the public domain, and most helpful if they actually have a license attached to it, so we know how we can reuse it. Okay, so next. And here's a very nice visual that you may have seen us use before about OER. So all the key features are in that graphic, which is a nice graphic, but we have to be careful to use it with some context and some text so that people who can't perceive the graphic will still get the same information. And we've popped that information in that second pane there. in that transcript that explains it. But if you want to go into this concept, or if you want to share with colleagues a little bit more what OER is, in that bottom pane, we have these videos and explanations by David Wiley, and he is someone who is an education fellow at Creative Commons, so he would know what he's talking about there, about the features of OER. So it's someone good to learn from. And these talks about these 5 features of OER, which he calls the 5 R's, and we've got a lovely graphic on that, and Alistair's going to take us through this.
Okay, thank you, Lillian. Yeah, so the 5 R's of the OER are actually unpacking a lot of the things that you've been describing already in your wish list. The ability to retain, to make, to download, to keep yourself, to control copies of your versions, your content as well, or indeed if you've been creating it, to know what kind of control there is, what it can be used for, what it can't be used for. So that whole idea of retention and knowing what rights you have. The reuse, of course, is the right to be able to reuse it in lots of different ways. As a geography teacher for many years, I was taking stuff from physics books and physics resources and physics websites and lots of different places that didn't plan to be geography resources, but because I could see something and I think, oh, that's a great image, or that's a useful graph, or a nice description of something, I could take it out and put it into a completely new context. The revising, the ability to adapt, that might be as simple as changing the language. And back in the days of the National Learning Network, which some FE colleagues may remember, there were resources which were brilliant, but it might be that a teacher would decide not to use them because it used this particular word for a concept rather than a different word. Both words were equally valid, but that teacher, in all their resources, just chose the different word. And so the ability to be able to revise, if they could have gone in there and just changed that one word for a new word or a different word that they use, that might have made a big difference on an adoption and update. And of course, updating where broken links take place as well is really important. So revising, remixing, taking content, moving it into other content, slipping it in, shuffling the cards around, as it were, really important to be able to do that. But fundamentally, and this is the bit where things often fall apart, it's that redistribution, being able to take something that has happened, that has been good, that you've created, that you've added huge value to, and then very often people just then keep that in their own little little repository, their own folder, their own intranet. So redistributing and being able to share and know how to share it so that you can give proper credit to the person that started it, proper credit to yourself where you've added to it, and so on. But we've added some more 3 future teacher R's, the future teacher. And the first one, research. We think there's some real value here in not just seeing something and thinking, oh, I'll use that. Or, as often happens, you have an idea comes in your head, oh, wouldn't it be great if there was a sort of alternative way of showing Bloom's taxonomy that kind of linked into maybe apps on the iPhone or Androids. And instead of spontaneously thinking, oh, I'll go make that, actually having a look around, doing a bit of research to see what already exists that could be repurposed, that may have been done brilliantly already. So, before doing any new things, have a think about, is the kind of resource I'm needing already there? Can I adapt or improve something else? Think about the approaches you've done. Use some of the brilliant OER journals and resources that we'll point you to later to just see if there's any academic studies being done. The reflection element is also really important, because we can try something, use somebody else's resource and it doesn't go well. Well, maybe that's not because the resource wasn't good. Maybe it's what we did with the resource that was the issue, or maybe we just needed to tweak it in some way. So reflecting on your use and having that kind of almost action research framework and mindset is really important. And just a link there back to our ARCS model, if you wanted to go back to that from one of our previous sessions, the ARCS model, which was adapted to be scary because we added inclusion to it. Some great ideas there to help you when you're improving resources and creating new collections. Regulations, this is a really big one because, of course, the regulations now are applying to all of us. And so you need to think about the accessibility standards. And the strength of OER is that you can iteratively add accessibility. We've got an example here, really nice example, accessibility related, in fact. Thank you very much, Leo, for adding this one in. And this came originally from the University of Hull, where Sue and colleagues were working on, I think a lot of us will have seen this, but to be able to take that and tweak it and reapply it in your own context is brilliant. So those are the 3 future teacher R's. And so looking at accessibility and thinking through with the regulations, that last regulation R, we had a discussion when we were preparing this where we were saying, okay, how does it actually go in terms of the legislation? Because the legislation is very clear that third-party content over which you have no control and you haven't funded and developed is exempt from the accessibility regulations. And that's recognizing that you may have tools that you use like Twitter that you use in teaching or something, or there may be blog platforms that you use that you don't pay for them, they're not funded by you, they're not developed by you, and you can't actually tweak their accessibility. YouTube, for example. Now, because they are exempt, we had this sort of bit of a discussion between us about, okay, well, how does that go with OER? Because OER hasn't been funded by me. I haven't developed somebody else's resource. So maybe I could use somebody's resource that wasn't terribly accessible, but I liked it. It would be good for lots of students. Maybe I could use that and I could just say, well, that's fine. There's no worry because it's exempt. And as we looked into this, we realized that actually that is true for some OER, but only certain elements of OER. And this is our kind of best stab at understanding how OER, accessibility, and your legal obligations sort of fits together. And so on the right-hand side, we've got this image showing the different types of, well, not OER, this is Creative Commons, but, so Creative Commons is obviously the licensing that's applied to a lot of OER materials. But what you can see from Creative Commons is that the very bottom two in the yellow, where you've got CC BY, non-commercial, non-derivative, and the one above that, the second yellow one, CC BY and non-derivative. If there is a non-derivative, if you cannot tweak it, you have no control over it, you haven't funded it, those two would be exempt in our understanding. So if you see material that's like that and you think, I'd like to use that, do I have to make it accessible? It would be exempt from the regulations as we can understand it. The others above that, if it's something where you can make derivatives, then actually you do have control. You can adapt, you can remix, so you would then have an obligation to improve its accessibility if it needed it. So I hope that's helpful. The next area on the next slide, we were just going to ask you for quickly in the text chats. We've got a couple of minutes or so we can look at this. In fact, maybe more. We're doing well for time at the minute. Internal is one thing to talk about. Me as a geography teacher taking content from other websites and other subject areas and so on, putting them together. What is really interesting from an OER point of view is when people take content inside their organization and they reuse it, reshare it, and work with other people, or even kind of say, I'll do this stats module and you make a biology version of it and I'll make a geography and you make a psychology version, because we're all covering the same kind of stuff. So we want to know what you're doing. If you've got examples within your own institution where there is some sort of OER-ish thinking going on, you may not be calling it OER, but you may simply be developing things between several departments. But we'd be interested in whatever flavors of that OER type sharing you've got. So I'll be quiet for a minute. which are great. And can you pop things in the text chat then? Thanks for the IP rights advice, Terry. Samantha, really good point there about encouraging people depositing OER to make it as accessible as they can. The beauty with OER is, of course, you can then, if you want to add, when you pick up something that's substandard, you can add to it. But it's ideal, obviously, if people are making it accessible at the beginning. So Teresa's got some limited because of the barrier. Oh, that's a really interesting thing. So the barrier presented by access to digital folders, just a structural, infrastructural barrier there. Yes, Sarah is going to give us the lightning strike a little bit later. I won't steal any thunder from you, I promise. So we've got Rebecca's talking about differentiated versions of the same base material. That's great. Rebecca, could you tell us a little bit more about that and pop a little bit more in the text chat pane? An example, subject areas or something? So Robert's talking about Central Creative Media Team producing material that can be used in media-based assessments. Great. And being shared via the VLE. Yes, the LibGuides. LibGuides is a really nice example, actually, of perhaps OER, and librarians are just the right kind of people to be at the forefront of some of this. Yeah, I hadn't realized, when I started working with librarians, I hadn't realized the extent to which these LibGuides are permeating the entire library communities. It is smart, very smart. But it is a very specific thing as well. I think you have, my understanding is you have to be sort of signed in or signed up to a LibGuide subscription or something to do that. So it's a kind of a hybrid system, I think, with a commercial element. That's great. They're coming in thicker and faster than I can keep up with. So keep those coming in, because again, we'll have access to the group chat. We can see that afterwards. Oh, Elizabeth, thank you. So is Elizabeth saying the LibGuides are available to anyone? And is that available, Elizabeth, as well as being able to repurpose? Because that's an interesting thing. Sway is an interesting one, Caroline. Yeah, that's definitely interesting. There's lots of stuff you can do with Sway, and it does have the advantage of quite a good native accessibility. Right, 21 minutes past, and I'm going to hand over to Teresa, because Teresa is our first guest speaker, and Teresa's got 5 minutes slot on some of her reflections. So we'll let Teresa go away. And Teresa, I do have a little dingle bell. If do you want me to give you that a minute before the end?
That's great. Yes,
okay.
dingle away.
I will try. You want to share your own screen as well, Teresa?
No, I think I'll stick
okay.
with sharing links in the chat, if that's okay.
Okay.
So I've got lots and lots of resources to share. But briefly, I thought it would be helpful to put a sort of person. Some of us as teachers have been doing this for quite a long time, and we've made that gradual move from analog to digital in terms of our teaching resources for our classrooms. And really what I hope is, by sharing the story of my journey, that it may provide a few resources along the way, and perhaps some pointers to things to look out for people who are still on that journey. So my personal interest really in developing and sharing resources actually goes right back to my early days of working as a secondary teacher, where always when we created a resource, we would share it within our department. So my language teams, French, German and Spanish teams, we would create something, put a copy in a central folder, and then when everybody was coming across a particular maybe grammatical issue or whatever, it would be common practice to have a quick flick through and see what we'd done already and what people had found useful. So I was quite surprised when I sort of moved into higher education that this wasn't particularly the case, and I started to produce a little folder myself that I put in a sort of shared teaching area, staff room, to see whether it would catch on. But the whole other dimension that opened up to this was, as we started to move to digital resources, the hard copy was not necessarily people's first reaction. It was more common perhaps just to have a quick look online and see what other people were doing. And this opens up whole new doors, really. The fact that you can just Google teaching the preterite in Spanish or whatever it is and find lots of resources, whether they're YouTube videos and things that you can repurpose and reuse. But what I became aware of quite quickly in this new domain, and this is sort of, we're talking sort of 2000 onwards, was that I didn't feel very comfortable about the legality of what was happening and what I could and couldn't use. And talking to colleagues within my own context, it was clear that they also had some concerns around whether you could just copy and paste something from the internet into your resource and whether you could include it. So last summer I decided to embark on a Creative Commons certification course. My first thought there was that this was going to be really dry. It was just going to be about the law and how to apply the law and things like this. But in fact, I found that course was really, really helpful. I'll just put a link into the chat here so that you can see a little bit more about it. It was done in a very creative way. So we were actually asked to create resources once we had understood certain key things about the legality of sharing and taking and applying perhaps Creative Commons licenses. And in that process of sort of creating and conveying your understanding, you end up with lots and lots of resources. Here's just a couple that I've prepared along the way that help explain what Creative Commons licensing is all about. And it is about building on intellectual property rights as they are already. So it's not a separate thing from copyright. It's actually built on the basis of copyright. But the concern of Creative Commons was that the balance was swinging too far towards ownership and locking down ownership and access only perhaps through payment. And therefore that was militating against some of the aims of copyright. The central aim of copyright was actually to make it easier to share information and knowledge and encourage the growth of and the proliferation of resources. And that's particularly relevant for teaching. I kind of got, I'm going to put another link in the chat here. I wrote a little article about Produçage with a colleague I met from Monash University, and together we looked at the legal complexities. So there's a little link there to that article. And just a final link that I'll include here as well. I embarked upon a mission really to help share learning about correct use of resources and sharing of resources through something called the Know-How Project, and that was funded by Warwick International Higher Education Academy. So there are a set of pages there with lots and lots of further links for you to explore. Personally, I think it's not only an important legal obligation, there's always also a moral obligation for us as teachers to make sure that lots of people have access to learning and not just those who can afford to have it. That's obviously a personal standpoint, but that's how I got into becoming an open education practitioner. It doesn't mean I share everything openly online, it just means I think about how and where I share, and I make material as available as I can if I think it will be helpful. So that's my journey. The bell has gone. I'll switch off my video. Thanks, Alistair.
Thank you very much, Teresa. And those links are well worth following. Teresa, I did notice some of the HiQDeck links appear to give me an error, a 500 server 500 error. Perhaps if you could have a look at that, and then if there's anything that needs tweaking, let us know.
Yeah, will do.
So thank you very much, and well done. You were bang on time, so that's perfect. If we move on to the next slide. it's really interesting coming from what Teresa's been saying about that desire from a very early stage to be able to say, okay, well, copyright exists for a good purpose. You know, copyright exists so that people know where they stand, they can protect intellectual property, not to lock it away, but to at least have recognition and so on. And so that whole Creative Commons is important. I think the problem is that many of us, and certainly I put myself in this, that image on the right hand side of the man with the swag bag, that was me as a teacher for 20 years, because so often I just didn't understand enough about the copyright, didn't have the time very often to find out, and so I was kind of forced into this what I call needless knavery. You know, I was a kind of a thief. I always tried to say, oh, I stole this from such and such a place, such and such a website. You can go back and find them if you need to. But there are so many resources that do exist, and that's what we're going to look at on the next slide, because you can start working. Let's say Ron's so busy telling me to hurry up that he's slowing me down. We've got a slide here on how to search savvy. So for images, for example, Google and Bing have got really easy ways where you can sort of search by usage rights, and that's a great way to not be have to steal stuff. And the next slide. The signposting and general background, there's some great links there that take you to lots of signposts for other general open educational resources. Research papers and journals, that next one. Again, some of you will be very familiar with this. If you're not, there is just a wealth of material out there. You could do whole degrees without spending a penny on books and resources. And then there are collections of kind of more general materials as well, like podcasts, lots of Xerti type stuff in Nottingham's Open Courseware initiative. So that's great. That now takes us to the point where I'm going to hand over to Sarah. Sarah, thank you very much. Tell us what you've been doing.
Hi there. So I work for a consortium of 6 universities. If you want to find out more about that, just go to our website, which is not in the chat anymore, but it's www. I'm trying to talk and type at the same time. It's very difficult. So we, thanks to Elizabeth Charles, who is on today's call, we have had a project by which we have been looking at creating a shared course. Could somebody move my slide along to the next slide? Yeah,
there we go.
So we have created a course for the consortium members as a pre-enrollment course for students about to start an undergraduate or postgraduate degree, all about their digital skills that they will need to have a successful learning experience. So we're not looking at digital skills for careers beyond university. It's from the very beginning, day one. We did a lot of research at the university, and we spoke to current first year students, we spoke to academics, what are their requirements, expectations of the skills that students come with when they start their degree, and what do they routinely lack. And based on this research, we came up with those 4 topic areas, 4 areas of things that we think students need to know before they start their courses to avoid any surprises. So we're not confronted with a zillion students saying, well, no one told me I needed to know that. So we cover those 4 topics: general technologies, so Microsoft applications and using email appropriately. Then we go into the learning technologies. So we say to students, you will be using a virtual learning environment. You will have lecture recordings to go to, so there's no surprises or anything when they start. We then, in the 3rd topic, talk about the fact that they will have to have multiple accounts. Single sign-on is not everywhere at the moment, so they have to understand that they will be setting up passwords. They need to know how to keep their computers safe, their content safe, and themselves. So we refer to social media. And then the getting organised, the real kind of skills they'll need for their learning. So there's the URL there. I will type it into the chat a little bit later on. Can we have slide 3, please? So in order to collect this content, which we decided how the course would be structured, we looked internally first. So I contacted the 6 partners of the BLE to find out what content there already was. Elizabeth, as I would hope, had some brilliant stuff about referencing and using the library, which we put into the course. Nothing in the course is in very deep, a deep level. We're not going to teach students how to use Microsoft Excel. It's a heads up that they're going to need to know this stuff, and here are links to go to. So as well as contacting our colleagues internally, we also looked external. To avoid reinventing the wheel, we only had, about 6-8 months, to probably less than that actually, to get a kind of a prototype pilot version together. So I wanted to find content from valid and quality sources that I knew I could trust, that we could use openly and safely. So I sent some begging emails round to various mailing lists that I'm on, including the health mailing list, the Heads of eLearning Forum, some of the alt mailing lists as well, just to see what people had already produced that we could use. I'm also a member of JISC's Digital Capability Community of Practice, so that has been a really excellent place to go to. Thanks, Ron. So the next few slides I'm going to whiz through. Sorry, Ron, you're going to have to be quick. Just to show you some snippets of the course. So we start with what is digital literacy, and we've embedded a video that's come from the University of Derby. Derby have released loads of really excellent videos, and I knew about this through the JISC community. So I was able to take what they've done and embed them directly into this Moodle course. This is another example. We talk a little bit about plagiarism and the fact that students will be using similarity reports and text matching technology. And you can see right at the bottom of the page is some red text. So we will provide this very course, a copy of this course, to firstly the 6 colleges I was working for, but they would need to personalise and customise the course to put in their local links. But in the middle of this page on the course, you can see a couple of links, one going out to some top tips from the University of Leicester and another one from the University of London, so there's a quiz there. On the next slide is one final example of a couple of videos that we've embedded, another one from Derby and one from the University of Sheffield, all about online identities. So on to slide 7. That's our final acknowledgement page. So we've acknowledged again all of the universities and other places where we've had some stuff. So on slide 8, I just wanted to kind of say, why are we giving this away? I've created this for my 6 colleges, but we felt that this is a really useful resource. And like, why not share it with the rest of the world? We've got Creative Commons cleared stuff, content in the course. Why not share it further? So we provide people a copy of the Moodle course. They can then take it, put it onto their own platform and customize it. We provide guidance material and a course map identifying what bits of it need to be localized. My penultimate slide is why are we giving this away? Well, as I said, why not? We'll be giving something back to the community of where we've had stuff, but also it's supporting the development of our course. So it's a bit lazy of us, but we'll get feedback from a community of practice that people taking a copy of the course will have to join, and they can tell us how they've adapted it, what they've done, and hopefully we can put that back into our final version. So my last slide is just about the considerations and conflicts that we've had to resolve. And this has just gone live. We've only been live for a week. At the moment, we're only providing a copy to UK institutions. We have a conflict between this altruistic, let's give this stuff away for free, but actually there's a load on us. So people are saying to me, oh, I can't access the demo site, and I've got to kind of muster up some time to provide some extra support that I didn't consider. And then there's copyright cleared licenses that we want to make it open, but our kind of intellectual integrity, how do we control what we've produced and make sure that people don't completely change it and then don't credit us? I guess that's the issue with Creative Commons, and we're new to this, we're new to sharing stuff. So there you go, get in touch if you want to have a further look, and let me know if you want to copy.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you. Ron's going to take us through the next bits.
Okay, thanks, Alistair. And thanks, Sarah. We'll pick up on some of the things you mentioned in the next few pages as well.
Yep.
We made available, or or repurposed one of our own resources here with some extra prompts about checking and comparing the accessibility of different document types. So each of these open the different types that you can see described here. I'm going to buy a bit of time by not opening them, but we encourage you to come back to this and explore the guidance. So each one of these contains guidance, the same text and the same images, but recreated in each of those document types, including some e-learning tools that you'll recognize from there. So you can come back to this in your own time and follow the prompts to what formats are good and what's good and bad about the different formats in terms of accessibility. So the next few slides are about us sharing with you how you can reuse and retain our resources, all the resources that we've made available. And of course, the easy thing that everybody can do is reuse the public links. So most of you will be familiar with the page that we have where you register for these webinars, and they contain all of the talk resources, the Xerte resources we've used to present with, but also the recordings and so on. So there's a single link there created in Xerte to that whole collection that you can easily share. You can also choose to share individual links to particular topics that we've covered, and perhaps put them in your own presentations and blogs. So a certain amount of remixing, if you like, there by just assembling them within other resources. You can also use things like embed code in the various VLEs and so on to embed the resources so that they appear as though they're part of your site, even though they're coming from our external Xerte server. One of the things we wanted to remind you all of is that we have a live site where we've not only shared the talk resources, but we've made them into courses and resources, journeys as we're calling them. So if I go very quickly to that, the homepage of that site, what you would do, and this is described in our resource later on, but you would go to the United Kingdom area, and there's a page where you can register. I won't open up that now, but actually it's logged me out, so I will just quickly log in. What you'll then see is two other very significant resources we've made available, and I'll explain as soon as I've logged in, which has taken a little while. So there's the registration form. I don't need to do that. I'm already registered. If I go back to the community, once I'm registered, I'll see this set of links here. And one of the tools we built, and it's a tool for also building the tool, is a thermometer. So it's a skills audit, and I'm not going to complete these questions. I think there are 40 questions in total. But if I go through and respond to each one of these, what that then links to is what we've called the Compass, which is a digital diagnostic, if you like, and the results of how I've responded. And each time I come and respond to this, it will show me, I can, for instance, see the last attempt. So I didn't attempt it just now, so it's not reflected that, but it's reflected one of my previous attempts, and I can see the average of everybody's attempts as well. But if I basically turn them all on, I can see that, and if I scroll down, it will then link me in priority order to the journeys that I should then complete. So that's how the thermometer and compass work. And then if we look at the journeys very quickly, at the moment when you register and log in, you'll see a subset of all the journeys that we're making available. These are ones that are kind of valid and translated and so on, but we have many more that we've yet to kind of finalize and make available, and they will all appear here. So this is a portal and a VLE and another VLE you can try called Pedit that has all of our resources in. So we'd encourage you to do that, and we'd encourage you to encourage your colleagues to do that as well. You can also download our resources. So for the conference, the face-to-face conference we'd had in York, we made some of our talk resources available for download already. There's a screenshot here that if I open it up, it will show me a list of viewing some of the talks, but also downloading some of the talks. And I'll come on to what you then see when you download that in a minute. We've also made, like Sarah, a download of a pre-assembled one of the journeys, in this case, the online learning what works journey in Moodle format. So you could import that into your Moodle, and likewise as a Blackboard format. And these links here are live, so you can download those examples of those journeys that we've made available and import them into your own environments if you have Moodle or Blackboard. You can also download the individual, or you will be able to download the individual resources and assemble them yourselves into whatever VLE you use. If you so for instance, maybe one thing that we'd like someone in the community to do if you use Canvas is to assemble them in Canvas and then make those Canvas assemblies available for download. So we've talked about throughout this session so far the ability to revise and remix and make it your own. We've kind of suggested here that the elephant in the room with some of this is, although things like individual documents, PowerPoint files, Word documents, sometimes PDFs, but often sometimes PDFs are a part of the problem, that the PDF is shared but not the original Word document that created the PDF. And so it's more of a troubling way to, it's less easy to repurpose it and make it your own. And when it comes to interactive learning content, like the resources that we've created here, one of the biggest barriers is often that they're created in commercial tools or specialist tools, or tools that somebody that might want to use it but just wants to change a paragraph or just wants to personalize the content can't easily do so because they require the specialist skills or specialist access to do so. One of the things we wondered about is, so what the easier way that you can repurpose our resources if you don't have access to the original authoring tool? And our authoring tool of choice is Xerte, and we'll come on to that in a moment. But one of the things about Xerte is that you can, for instance, select and copy and paste. So I could select all of this on the page here, and for instance, if I just bring up a quick example that I did earlier, here's a copy of that first pane that you saw, copied and pasted into PowerPoint. Going back to the skills audit, the accessibility audit that we mentioned earlier, try doing that in the output of some other tools like, well, I won't mention any names, but some other tools. If you try selecting and pasting, you'll find that quite often the text isn't actually text, it's embedded as an image in the resource and you can't copy and paste it and so on. And that has lots of accessibility issues itself. Why we use Xerte, there's a resource here that you can explore in your own time, but if you open it up and then it's an interactive hotspot interaction created in Xerte that will explain all the kind of benefits that to Xerte, including, as we've mentioned many times already today, it truly supports the 5 R's and also the additional R's, and particularly accessibility. Now you might say that actually you don't have Xerte, you can't get Xerte, and it's not available. There's a page here. This is not a hard sell. If you really can't get an institutional installation, then we do provide kind of individual accounts on an install, a shared install, and I spend a lot of time supporting large organizations and small organizations with their own in-house installation or with external hosting of installation. There's contact links there if you want that. But if we rephrase that, and you weren't talking about Future Teacher, but you were talking about a whole collection of other resources on topics that might be useful, the suggestion here is if you pose that as the scenario to whoever might be the decision maker about establishing a Xerte install, you're being offered this for free, this large collection of resources. All you need to be able to edit them and make them your own is a free and open source authoring tool that allows you to do exactly that. And so the suggestion is, what would your answer be to that question? And whoever that person that might decide for you, that's part of the criteria there. So we'll come on to that again in a minute as well. If you do remix and share your resources, you really ought to, or our resources rather, you really ought to reshare and redistribute them as well. And in fact, I think Sarah mentioned about the OER in some resources you've used. I think to a certain extent there's an obligation if you remix to reshare anyway. Whether that's an informal obligation or a formal one is a moot point. But really, if you are remixing, you ought to be resharing as well. And you can obviously share how you've been using our resources via social media, via public links and so on, and ideally make them available for download just like we have. So we wondered about how people are doing that with Future Teacher resources already, and there's a couple of links there, and we have a history of tweets and so on where people were positive about our resources, and we, at the end of every webinar we've done, we've had people saying they'll go back and share, but actually we don't get to see much of that, and we really need to get your feedback and your examples about how you've been sharing our resources, and especially if you've been repurposing them. In terms of Xerte, there's some examples here that again you can explore in your own time, and I'm not sure whether Yap Yam is in the room with us, but there's a really nice resource that's in Dutch here, but you can use the translation in your browser to kind of translate it. And what they provided, they're big users of Xerte, is not only the links to view them, but the links to download them. And then they've shown you evidence of how they're using them as starting points to create a flipped learning resource or an assessment resource and so on. And so they're calling them recipes, and they're examples of how they're using them. And like I say, you can use the browser translate to explore that. But also there's some nice examples from Cardiff. And in fact, I added a couple from Cardiff that you might want to consider, Sarah, that fall into that category of digital well-being. And for instance, here's the one on knowing your digital footprint. And these are very nicely made in Xerte. And there's another one there on making your online identity account and building your online profile and so on. And as you can see, on the front page there is that they're shared under Creative Commons license. How easy is it to redistribute with Xerte? Well, it's an online tool, so making the public links available is very easy, and you can see there, I won't read out the other points, you can explore this in your own time. There are RSS feeds that enable all of this, syndication feed, and even guides on how you can do that and how you can download it. So what we were going to do was just very quickly show you how, for instance, you might be able to do that. Now I have many panes open here, but if I bring up this one, I won't do, for those of you who are familiar with Moodle, you can drag that backup file of the Moodle course and it would automatically create, after a couple of steps, a copy in your own Moodle of that. But here's an example of an empty Xerte. There's just a couple of, I pre-imported the thermometer and the compass that I showed you earlier, but I'll just very quickly import the online learning journey that we backed up earlier. So online learning, what works. And there it is. So we make that link available. You can then come in here and edit it. And so perhaps the first thing you want to do is take out all the information about myself, Alistair, and Lillian, and populate your own content in there and so on. So this is a complete copy of that particular talk that we gave on online learning, what works, and you can edit it and make it your own and so on. The thermometer and compass are slightly more complex because they do require XAPI and LTI, but you can see here that unlike other skills audits that are out there that actually you can use them, but you can't necessarily make them your own, you could come in here and change, if you didn't like some of these questions, you could change them, and then when you change them and play that resource, your changes would be part of that compass and thermometer, and likewise the compass and the way that works. And just to very quickly bring up a diagram that explains all of that, is that the way that compass and thermometer works is that you link the two tools into your LMS or VLE. There's a screenshot of Blackboard there, but it will work in Moodle and clearly works in Pedit. And then the communication happens seamlessly behind the scenes and populates the dashboard. And if we actually have a look at the dashboard for the compass, And this is the dashboard in Xerte, but the dashboard is, sorry, just refresh this. It's going to default to, let's go back to 2017. And then you can see, actually, you can really dig deep into the analysis of the responses by everyone, and you can see that there are a large number of interactions, only a relatively small number of students, but that's because this has all been under development, and you can see how you can really drill down into the analysis of responses and so on. And if I choose one of these, to get even more analysis of the responses and so on. So works on an individual level as well as a whole group level in terms of analyzes the responses to that digital thermometer and compass. And we wanted also to remind you about the research, reflection and regulations that Alistair explained that we've added to the 5 R's. And again, there's some information there you can read in your own time, but it's really a reminder to use the research, to reflect on what you're doing and to be mindful of the regulations and to use all the guidance that we've provided throughout all of these talks in terms of accessibility and how to achieve the widest possible accessibility. And we have a personal action plan which repeats the things that were on those previous screens, and you can choose which ones you're going to do in terms of how you're going to reuse our resources. I'll just quickly go to the last screen here, and you'll be able to download that action plan as a reminder of what you thought of during or immediately after this webinar. We usually ask you what one thing. As you can see, there's a whole range of ways that we've suggested that you can help future-proof the resources, and we'd like you to, perhaps use that tool to generate your own personalised action plan. I know that was a whistle-top tour of some of those things. I'll pick up on the text chat while Lillian talks about the background of all of this and the framework that we've used.
Yeah, thanks, Ron. That was a whistle-stop tour, and I found myself thinking I need extra tuition on the analytics part of what we can do with Xerte. And then both Alistair and I were looking at the Deltion recipes, and they always incorporate a results page in their Xerte objects. And I've never been in the habit of doing that, but I think it's a wonderful way for people to kind of have a bit of reflection at the end of a learning object. Looking at their own performance through an online learning object. Is that Alistair's dong?
That's the dong. That's ahead of time. Don't worry, that's in a different time zone.
So totally different time.
It's also different. It thinks it's 4 o'clock, I think.
So for anyone, I think almost everyone who's joined us has seen the digital competency education framework from Europe. So I'm not going to go on too much about it, except that if you're new and you have not come across this before, please do have a little look at the framework and follow the links through. I know it's an EU framework, but many people are finding it very helpful, very sensible, very usable. It's very education based digital skills. Okay. As Ron has already covered a lot of this in the previous few pages, all we need to tell you is that, you can join us on these journeys. It doesn't stop here. We will continue to future-proof our webinars, and I promised Rebecca I'd mention how we were going to make our sessions more sustainable. So we've completed an entire cycle with 18 webinars and lots of learning materials put out to the community. And if we stopped here, a lot of those resources, the links will break, they'll start to look old, there'll be typos in there that no one will correct. So what we're planning to do from autumn onwards is to rerun the entire cycle of webinars again without remaking our learning objects, but recycling them, reusing them. At that point, we will be checking on hyperlinks. At that point, we invite the community to come back and share with us how they have used the learning object, how they have moved on from looking at this particular topic 2 years ago, what they've done since then. So all of us are on this journey and a cycle of repurposing the very resources that we've been looking at, but also adding to our understanding of how people develop on each of these journeys. So that's our model and our way of practicing what we preach, and it'd be lovely if more people did that when they ran projects as well in terms of sustainability. So do join our mailing list if you're not already on it. This is how we keep in touch with everyone and let you know about the next webinar. And as Ron says, if you'd like to kind of, I think we've kind of mentioned that, if you like to kind of think about one thing that you will do as a result of having attended this webinar, what one action will come out of this time that you've spent with us. If you want to put it in the text chat, it'd be great. And thank you very much, everybody, for joining in. Teresa, Sarah, thank you so much. And I know Terry might not be here anymore, but he's added loads of links to our Zoom chat, which is fantastic and fabulous. So yes, and of course this particular resource can be shared and reused, so feel free to follow up. Ron will be adding the recording to our Future Teacher page when it's been edited down.
Eleanor was asking about, are there any other examples of digital skills frameworks like the European one? What about the ETF one? Do you think that's relevant?
The ETF one might be relevant from a further education, but all these digital skills frameworks, and I'm not sure, Sarah, if you have something within your digital skills, if that's very student-centered. But yeah, that's what's particularly good about the DigComp Edu. That is a digital skills framework for educators, and it's really, really nice. So if the ETF is probably the best one to try. That's quite UK biased, but it's further education.
There's the JISC, it's not quite the same, but it's close to the JISC Digital Capability Framework.
Yeah, that goes beyond, if you like, teaching and learning. It goes to all sorts of skills that a teacher should have in order to be a good educator. But if you're just focusing in on the teaching and learning aspects, then it can be useful to have a smaller framework to work with.
Yeah.
Well, that's nice to hear everyone's what they're going to go away and do. I know that I'm going to go away and promote Sarah's digital skills awareness course to others, and really look at the analytics and reports that you can pull together at the end of a Xerte learning object. 5 R's, Rianne, and your name begins with the letter R. That's great. Rianne and Ross and Rebecca. That's brilliant. Yes, Elizabeth, repurposing, that's really good. Yeah, Teresa, it'd be interesting to see what your experience will be like when you maybe try and transpose some of those things into Xerte, because I know there's some activity types in H5P I couldn't access just using keyboard only.
If you're still on the mic, Teresa, it'd be useful to know what I saw in the message that you mentioned there were some challenges with H5P. It'd be useful to know what they were.
They were essentially just the Moodle installation that we've got hasn't got the most up-to-date version of H5P, but they've updated it now, so it works now. But there are lots of different activity types. The one I'm using is an MIT one at the moment. It's called Course Presentation, and it is quite quick and easy to use, but I don't think it's as powerful as Xerte.
I think every time I come online with I nearly caught Ron Zerti there. Every time I come online with Ron and Alistair, I learn something else. This is why in terms of, we were talking about, I think Sarah and I were discussing about what makes people share stuff. And it's exactly this. We come together, we put in a bit of time, we come together. But this is my professional development opportunity, working with Ron and Alistair and you guys. Because, everything that we've shared in this 1 hour, it would have taken me a long time to come across if I was working on my own.
I was thinking that actually it's the conversations, whether you call them the water cooler conversations or whatever, but as a teacher, the most useful thing you can do is to talk to other teachers. And it's easier than ever now online, so those networks are so important.
It's easier online because in many cases the social area that used to exist in the buildings no longer exists. So.
Absolutely, that's right, and the time isn't there either. So very rarely you actually get time to sit together and focus on something.
And if it was a short acronym for the Future Teacher Water Cooler, it would be the FTWC. I'm not sure that would that would work.
Might have to work on that
one. Yeah.
We usually have a bit of informal discussion now, but stop the recording. So should I do that? Yeah. Okay.
Okay. No, that was fabulous. I really, I was